Welcome to the Jones Middle Summer Reading Program for rising 8th graders. Don't forget, rising 8th graders at Jones Middle are expected to read 2 books from the summer reading list, 1 fiction and 1 nonfiction book that have a common topic. Remember, fiction novels are fake characters in a made-up story. This would include realistic fiction, historical fiction, and suspense and thrillers. Nonfiction books are not fake. That is, they are informative books about history, science, geography, etc. The Titanic was one of the worst maritime disasters in history. Captain Smith hoped to set a record for the fastest crossing of the Atlantic, but instead the ship went down in an icy abyss, sending more than 1,500 passengers to a frozen death. If you fell in love with Jack and Rose in the movie version of the Titanic, you will like the historical fiction book SOS Titanic by Eve Bunting. 15-year-old Barry O'Neill is traveling first class from Ireland to America on the maiden voyage of the Titanic. He finds his life endangered when the ship hits an iceberg and begins to sink. Can he save himself and his new friend Pegeen, a third-class passenger? The nonfiction companion is Titanic, Voices from the Disaster by Deborah Hopkinson. This book tells the tragic tale of the Titanic using archival photos along with quotes from primary sources and personal stories from the crew and passengers. Learn about the sequence of the life rafts launching and what the survivors went through as they waited for the rescue from the Carpathia. Read actual letters from the survivors. The 50s and 60s were an exciting time of change, both politically and socially. Following the World War II, the Cold War and the Civil Rights Movement gained momentum during this period and made life in America quite exciting. The documentary fictional novel Countdown by Deborah Wiles uses text and photos to tell the story of 11-year-old Franny Chapman, who is dealing with the typical problems with home and friends while at the same time living through the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. The nonfiction companion to Countdown is Freedom Walkers, the story of the Montgomery bus boycott by Russell Friedman. Follow the story of Rosa Parks as she refuses to give up her seat to a white man and begins the Montgomery bus boycott in 1955. Read about Martin Luther King and other boycott heroes whose work led to major milestones in the civil rights movement. While we Americans live a pretty comfortable life here in the 21st century, could we still be in danger from major epidemics? Code Orange by Carolyn B. Cooney is a suspense thriller about the dangers of bioterrorism. While conducting research for a school paper on smallpox, Mitty finds an envelope carrying 100-year-old smallpox scabs and fears that he has infected himself and all of New York City. Then he must deal with the terrorists who want his smallpox samples. Do you enjoy shows about forensic medicine such as House and Bones? Then you will enjoy Secret of the Yellow Death, the true story of medical sleuthing by Suzanne Germain. This book describes the true story of how doctors and researchers, led by Dr. Walter Reed, tracked down the cause of yellow fever, a disease that threatened to turn into an epidemic during the early 1900s. In 8th grade social studies, you will learn about the Civil War and the president who led the Union, Abraham Lincoln. The historical fiction novel An Acquaintance with Darkness by Anne Rinaldi is set in Washington, D.C. at the time of Lincoln's assassination. When her mother dies and her best friend's family is implicated in the assassination of President Lincoln, 14-year-old Emily must go live with an uncle she suspects of being involved in stealing bodies for medical research. To learn more about Lincoln's assassination, read the nonfiction book Chasing Lincoln's Killer. Most people know that Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, but most people do not know the whole story about the chase to capture Lincoln's killer, John Wilkes Booth. In Chasing Lincoln's Killer by James Swanson, you will read what made John Wilkes Booth decide to kill Lincoln and how he planned the assassination. Then you will read how the authorities pieced the murder together and used real-life detective work to track Booth and his accomplices down to bring them to justice. Another major topic in 8th grade social studies is the colonization of America. The historical fiction book Chains by Laurie Halse Anderson tells the story of Isabel, a slave girl who is sold to a cruel couple in New York City during the beginning of the Revolutionary War. Isabel gets recruited to spy for the rebels. Can she save her friend Curzon, who has been imprisoned by the British? Do you enjoy forensic TV shows like Bones and House? Then you will enjoy the nonfiction book Written in Bone, Buried Lives of Jamestown and Colonial Maryland by Sally M. Walker. Learn how forensic archaeologists excavated the grave sites in James Fort in Jamestown, Virginia, and how the human remains revealed what life was like for the settlers of the Chesapeake Bay area in the 1600s and 1700s. We have heard a lot on the news about people who have suffered amputations as a result of the wars in the Middle East, and most recently as a result of the Boston bombings. In the realistic fiction book Unstoppable by Tim Green, Harrison, a foster child, finally experiences good luck when he is placed in a caring home and becomes a football star. Then his luck turns sour when he has his leg amputated due to a cancerous tumor. Can Harrison overcome adversity and rebuild his life? Next, read the nonfiction companion to Unstoppable, Soul Surfer, a true story of faith, family, and fighting to get back on the board by Bethany Hamilton. Bethany Hamilton had her arm bitten off by a shark while surfing off the coast of Kauai, Hawaii. Can she rebuild her life and her surfing career despite her physical disability? As we learn about the Holocaust, we learn about the horrible, tragic acts of violence against humanity committed by the Nazis. And yet there are also inspiring stories of courage and selflessness. Learning about the Holocaust is important to ensure that we do not let history repeat itself. In the book Prisoner B 3087 by Alan Gratz, you will follow Jack Gruner as he is forced to live in the Krakow ghetto of Poland, and then is eventually shipped off to what would be a total of 10 concentration camps. He is separated from his family and learns to live one day at a time as Prisoner B 3087, the number assigned to him by the Nazis and tattooed on his arm. Were the Nazis held accountable for their horrible acts during the Holocaust? Read The Nazi Hunters by Neil Bascom to learn about the spies who carried out an undercover operation to bring back Adolf Eichmann, the Nazi in charge of the transportation of Jews to ghettos and concentration camps during the Holocaust. World War II documentaries are filled with amazing stories about amazing heroes. Learn about some unusual heroes in the historical fiction book Code Talker, a novel about the Navajo Marines of World War II by Joseph Bruchac. After being taught in a boarding school run by whites that Navajo is a useless language, Ned Begay and other Navajo men are recruited by the Marines to become code talkers, sending messages during World War II in their native tongue. Read about another World War II battle in the nonfiction book Left for Dead, A Young Man's Search for Justice for the USS Indianapolis by Pete Nelson. One of the worst losses in U.S. naval history was the sinking of the USS Indianapolis by a Japanese submarine. Over 800 men died and over 300 men were left in the open sea, defending themselves from sharks. The captain of the Indianapolis became a scapegoat and was blamed for the tragedy. Even the captain's own crew knew he was innocent. However, it took 50 years to clear his name when Hunter Scott, an 11-year-old boy, decided to study the Indianapolis for his history fair project. Read this book to find out how Hunter was able to clear the captain's name. The first step in the summer reading program is to be sure to fill out your reading contract and return it to your homeroom teacher. All the books on the 8th grade summer reading list are available at the public library or at local retail booksellers such as Barnes & Noble and Books for Less. You can also purchase these titles on the internet using online book retailers such as Amazon.com, Walmart.com, and BarnesandNoble.com. Remember, rising 8th graders at Jones are expected to read 2 books, 1 fiction and 1 nonfiction on a common topic. You will have a written assignment which will be completed and turned into your language arts teacher in August for a grade. The directions for the written assignment will be in your end of the year report card envelope, and you can also get to the directions online through the Jones website under the Students tab, Media Center, and Summer Reading. Summertime is a great time to read and relax and enjoy a good book. After all, reading is something you can do anywhere at any time. Have a great summer, and we'll see you at Jones Middle in August.